feel like I should have wings or a halo or something. All right. So now that I can't see any of you guys, who's a build engineer? Large crowd. Awesome. Did you raise your hand, Boy?
I did. I am a build engineer for second, and
That's my fault.
it is. And I'm not leaving the room right.
All right. So the title of this was Boyd's idea. The fun part, I think we'll get to. The profit part, I'm still working on that. Although it is cheaper than CloudBeast. So, who me? I've been around a long time. I've worked at all those places, pretty much doing the same job, progressively getting better, I hope. One of those, top left, is when I used to work for Chris. Nice to see you. Some of these don't exist anymore. This is my volunteer work. You might have seen me helping out at Linux Fest and at Awesome DevOps. And I just crossed 52 million units in various projects in the Boeing project. So my wife hates our electric bill. This is me when I'm not working. And this is Paul, my new title. Yeah. Yeah, so don't follow me on Twitter. I never say anything. I just use it to follow other people.
Still do a lot of hands-on or not?
Yeah. Well, I haven't replaced me yet, so I'm still me and I'm director now. I need a QA person. Please help me out.
Are there any QA people in the audience?
You'll see why shortly. All right, so as Boyd said, when I got there, we were using Jenkins as our build engine. I've used Jenkins before. I like it a lot, but W2O wasn't using it very well. Basically, the Jenkins jobs were, for the most part, just a little bash script that would shell out to a web server and run a git pull on a particular branch. And so that in itself worked reasonably well. Problems with it was that anybody could trigger it without any really regard for QA process or timing of when a new push was supposed to happen. The majority of our sites are built by us for a client. And so it's the client really who decides when they want a new version, not your junior dev who happens to want to do a merge to master on a Friday afternoon and then go home. So we changed that up a bit. Oh, here, I have a risk slide. Did I cover them all? Oh yeah, build artifacts. So because we were just pulling latest off of any particular repo, we had no rollback capability without going back into previous Jenkins logs, finding a commit hash, and then doing a fresh repull on whatever that old hash was, if they hadn't deleted the build records by then.
They didn't do labeling?
No labeling. Nothing, any level of Git sophistication you might think of, they didn't have it. And there was always the risk that when they were merging from the staging branch to the master branch, that something would go wrong, and that whatever went wrong would immediately go into production with no oversight. So, change the process. Major change had nothing to do with the build engine. It was more of a development change, and that is change the build workflow, or the development workflow to base everything off the master branch. We branched off of that for various tasks. Most of the tasks are tied to a Jira ticket. You'll see a slide on that later. And then merges back into master were handled with pull requests. And depending on which team you're talking about, there's different levels of rigor over who was allowed to approve a pull request. The real top-notch teams, basically any peer can do a code review and approve a PR. Some of the teams that have junior developers, it would be either a senior dev or the team lead who would have to approve the PR. And so once we got the Git work better, then we switched to Bamboo. We had already been using Jira and Confluence, and so it seemed like a pretty easy move to add to the Atlassian family and move to Bamboo. We're using their hosted version rather than our old in-house Jenkins server, which that was the other risk I forgot to put on there. Our Jenkins would crash constantly because it was on an old, poorly maintained, no chef virtual machine that was under provisioned. So with the hosted Bamboo, I don't have to worry about any of that. We pay for a license that gives us up to 5 build agents, and they maintain it all for us, which is really nice because I'm too busy. So big change that we did when we moved to Bamboo was the separation of the build and deploy phase. So those two phases, are there any Bamboo users? I know you, a couple, right? So you guys know they have build plans and deploy plans are very distinctly separate items. And for the majority of our work that's a WordPress site, the build phase is actually very uninteresting. It's simply fetch all the code out of the repo, maybe run a PHP unit against it. Pretty rare event for us. I'm hiring for QA. And then package it into an artifact, which can later be deployed. The interesting stuff for us happens in the deploy phase. And so in a Bamboo deploy plan, you can define a series of environments that can be individually deployed. And so in our model, we have a dev stage and a prod. And you can promote that build artifact from environment to environment as it passes certain QA gates or certain client approvals or whatever the account manager determines is trigger for a next environment. I just talked all through this. Okay, so one of the keys here is that the control over when something happens is determined by the person who's most familiar with when it ought to happen. So in the case of the dev environment, we want to update the dev environment every time there's new code to be looked at. So whenever the dev team commits new code, it goes through whatever their build process is and automatically deploys to the dev environment. And they get immediate feedback. Once it's been looked at in the dev environment and whatever collection of Jira tickets that's associated with that build is marked ready for staging, then the program manager, the account manager, and this person I'm hiring would determine when it's time to go to the staging environment. For a lot of our stuff, once it's in staging, it's actually visible to our client where they can do their acceptance testing, and they deal with, through the account manager, to notify when it's time to go to production. And so only a few people have the ability to push to production. Excuse me. I need to slow down just a tad. So people who've studied continuous deployment and continuous delivery will note that this staged, manually triggered promotion scheme doesn't fit in with CD. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that we have to have that client approval before it goes live. So if you're developing apps that you control end to end, this may not be exactly the workflow you want. You may want to, and Bamboo can do this, have it automatically promote to different environments based on some metrics, typically some kind of automated testing, which we don't have. Thus the hiring QA person. And the best part is, once it's compiled and turned into an artifact, I don't have to worry about it anymore. So, who does what? Build scripts generally are written by the dev team with advice from the build engineers. We have in flight right now, Maven and Grunt are the two big ones. And then of course in the in case of WordPress, there's no build phase. But my main driver there is to make sure that we don't wildly diverge between teams on how they do things. It makes management a lot easier, and also makes it a developer on Team A can easily hop onto Team C because they're familiar with what processes they're going to use. And dev teams control when they get update because they push to master. This, I'm going to jump to the second bullet. In my career growth as a build engineer, this was a big thing for me. When I hit this day, life got better. Because I don't have to do everything. I just have to control what happens. And so, as long as I've written the deploy script, I don't care who pushes the button. Because I know what it's going to do. And they're not going to get away with any shenanigans. Right. And the reason why this phase isn't written by the dev teams is for operational reasons. We don't want to share user creds for the servers to the whole dev team. And so me and my guys will author the deploy scripts in Bamboo, and we're the only ones who have access to those creds. I think I said all this already. Cool. I'm going to move on. Okay, so a few details about Bamboo. In the build plan, we're currently using it to link to Bitbucket or GitHub, both of which we're using Git. Bitbucket also supports Mercurial, which we're not using, and they have links to other repository types if you need to for some reason. The builds are all triggered by changes in the repo. If you're using Atlassian Stash, which is their behind the firewall hosted Git thing, a commit to Stash immediately triggers build. But the hosted Bamboo and the hosted Bitbucket don't have that yet. Even though it says they do, they don't. So don't try it. So in our case, we actually have it on a 3-minute polling system. So every 3 minutes it checks for changes, and that will trigger the build. Side effect of that is, on a busy day, a single build may pick up more than one commit. And if one of those was a bad commit, then you got a little bit more debugging to do to figure out who to yell at. Is this visible? All right. So, first example is one of our WordPress builds. Here's the build plan. Very exciting. Check out the source code. Done. Generate an artifact. In this case, go to the root, grab everything, stick it into the artifact. Very boring build. But the key is it generates an artifact, which we never had before on the WordPress sites. Example of a Node.js build. A little bit more exciting. Check out the code, run the build script. And then a lot of stuff happens in npm install. The config file is controlled by the dev team, so this line could do little or it could do a lot. I don't know. I don't really care. Same thing with this is installing tools, the Bower and the composer, and then we run grunt with a CI target. One more example. Here's a Maven build. This one actually connects to two different repos. This is a Bitbucket repo with the main application source code, and this is a GitHub repo with some third-party source code, Apache Streams. The Maven script is not very exciting in the Bamboo side. It just runs clean and package, and it's up to the dev team to write in the Maven script what this means. Notice we're not and any Maven users, there's a lot of different goals you could choose, but we stopped at package because that's all we need to generate the artifact.
highlight your the idea that you're in control of what's happening during the build there because you've ceded that to the developer in terms of how they define package?
Yes, they control what goes into an artifact. I control what happens to the artifact.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I messed up the distinction. Thanks.
All right, so now here's some examples of how the deploy works. Slightly more exciting than the build in the case of WordPress. The list of environments that you can promote to is arbitrary. For us, we have a dev, stage, and a prod. As I mentioned before, the dev environment is updated automatically every time there's a new commit, and then these are manually triggered. Here's what a deploy looks like. It grabs the artifact out of the artifact repository, and it runs a deploy script which looks like this. No, it doesn't. Where's the deploy script? Oh, that's secret sauce. I'm not going to tell you what the deploy script does. Just like I won't tell my devs what it does. But essentially, it puts the artifact in the right place on the right server with the right permissions and the right actions. Please don't ask any questions on that. All right, so here is a different API deploy. So this one is more interesting. The API is running, so we have to kill it and later restart it. In between, we just SCP the WAR file or the jar file to the right place. And then this task launches the jar with the right Java settings and the right credits and all that stuff. And in this project, there's also a small website, which is the front end to the API. That's just an rsync task. Any questions on builds and deploys before I move on? Yes.
So you mentioned earlier that this gets triggered when a commit's detected. This is when you do a pull request, when you insert it into the branch, right?
Yes. So the dev team is working on a task branch.
Right?
When they're ready to merge it back to master, they'll generate a pull request. Pull request is code reviewed and accepted. And then when it's merged to master, and that merge is pushed back to the repo, that's the trigger that starts up.
But who's doing the merge? I mean, technically the developer has the permissions to do the merge because they have access to that repo, right?
So in Bitbucket, they have more granular permissions. You can lock individual branches,
Right, but not in GitHub.
Right. Well, that's why we're not doing much more in GitHub.
You'd have to fork in order to be able to keep it.
The same model would work with forks versus branches. And in GitHub, if you want to lock a particular merge target, then forks is what you need. Good point. Sorry, I didn't bring that up. All right, so here's some Bamboo awesomeness. Because we're working with feature branches, we want to provide CI feedback to the dev teams on every branch. But we don't want to have to go into Bamboo every time they make a new branch and set up a new build. We don't have to. You can turn on automatic branch management. And what that does is, every time it sees within that repo that a new branch exists, it makes a copy of the build plan to execute against the branch versus master. The only difference is the branch build doesn't automatically deploy to dev. It'll run through the build phase, it'll run through the test phase if they have one, and it'll give them that feedback, which some of the teams use that as one of their metrics when they do a PR review to make sure that the commits have passed at least that part of the build phase. It also has the ability to link back to Jira. I have some slides to show you that. So within Jira, you can see the history of all the builds that are associated with a ticket. And from the build, you can link back to Jira, and from the Jira, you can link back to Bamboo. Now, Atlassian is not the only place that does that. When I was working for Chris, we did a lot of the same concepts in Microsoft Team Foundation Server. And yes, I know, but it works. The integration between the parts of that tool chain are pretty sweet. No matter what you have to say about individual pieces, the parts work really well together. Atlassian is also very good at that. So here's an example. This is the bottom right corner of a Jira ticket. was actually called development. And you can see, this is a very busy ticket. They've created 8 branches. I just randomly picked that one. That's probably the biggest number I've seen. A lot of commit history, 2 open PRs, some builds with some timing. And you can see that these builds have been deployed all the way to production in various other places, which is kind of interesting. The PR shouldn't still be open if it's gone to prod. I have to check in with that team.
Proof that it really always boils down to social engineering, right?
Yeah. So, more Bamboo awesomeness. Hip chat notifications. So every build can be configured to notify hip chat with status. Typically, because our builds are very uninteresting, we don't have build notifications in hip chat, but our deploys are interesting, so we do have deploy notifications. Now, in this case, this is that Maven project we were looking at a little while ago. And in that case, the build is kind of interesting. And you can see you have a couple of failures, and then finally a success. Here's my raw result, 286 unit tests. This is more than pretty much the rest of the company combined, all based on this one deal.
Hey Doug, do you need a QA engineer?
I'd love a QA engineer.
Okay, just check.
All right. And you can see, I don't know if there's many HipChat users here. This is, the notifications just mingle in with the conversation that's going on in the room. So as your team is busy conversing throughout the day, they'll get the feedback right in the conversation that they're having. And all of these are hyperlinks. So if you want to know why this build failed, within HipChat, you just click on this and it takes you exactly where you want to be. Down here are some examples of deploy messages. And you can do the C details if you need to. Any questions about HipChat? No, okay. So now Bamboo isn't 100% awesome. There's some things that are weird. So, like most web-based things, you have to mouse around a lot to get anything done in Bamboo. Score 1 for Jenkins on this. If you host your own Jenkins, and you know the proper XML, you can just generate an XML file, save it in the right place on the Jenkins server, and you're happy. You never have to mouse on anything. With the hosted Bamboo, you don't have access to any of that. So, a lot of mousing. But they do have the concept of cloning something. So, once you've defined a standard build plan for a particular project type, you can clone that plan fairly easily. And then all you have to do is change what repo it's pointing at. In my case, I also changed the name of the artifact it's generating. Typically, I'll name the artifact the same as, or very similar to what the repo name was, so it's easy to tie them together. But that's arbitrary. They just in the last release added the ability to clone the deploy plan, which I was waiting for because deploys are really the things that are more complicated for me. We didn't do such a great job. There's a menu at the top of the website on your web page where you can either create or clone a build plan. It's create a plan, clone a build plan, or create a deploy plan. But there's no link there for clone the deploy plan. You have to build your way into any particular deploy plan, and then find in the upper corner menu, expand that, and then there's an option to clone that plan. I don't know why they buried that when they made it. Huh?
It's probably not right.
You know if there's a manual file to configure all that stuff? Like behind the UI?
There may be if you host your own Bamboo.
Oh, you're hosting this.
Yeah. So I would hope so, but I don't have any visibility for that. I don't know if your talk gets into parallelism or multiple stages. So Bamboo also has the ability for more complicated builds to build in stages that can cascade, or you can build independent pieces of your build in parallel if you have more than one build agent. None of my stuff is that complicated, so I haven't explored that yet.
The key to the dependencies and rollbacks if any of the components fail and that kind of stuff?
I haven't explored that yet.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes. With the parallel stuff, you can actually, it's really neat if you have a large set of integration tests that take a long time to run. If ahead of time you can kind of chunk them out, you can run, based on build agent, you can run the integration tests in parallel. And so it's not like omniscient. In fact, it can like determine which test to break out by itself. I work at Elastic. So for our Confluence product, we actually, I think there are 6 parallel build agents that run the integration tests, because there are so many of them, and it's significantly faster that way. And if any one of those parallel integration tests fail, then it stops all the other parts as well, and kind of rolls. You know, it doesn't get to the point of ever rolling out an artifact, so it doesn't have to roll anything back either. But it does kind of chain.
But if you want to orchestrate, let's say you have build that's composed of multiple pieces, and if you upgrade one, you've got to upgrade the others or none. Does it allow that sort of between separate jobs kind of create interdependencies? I think Jenkins does this, right?
Yeah, so if you have multiple build plans, and you want to tie those together as a step flag. I haven't done it. I haven't done anything quite that complicated. A lot of the stuff on my team when we build it, we pull everything out once in order to do all the integration tests together.
Cool. Thanks. Let's see. I'm almost done. Let's see. Is it gonna work? Okay, suddenly I've lost my internet. Okay. Well, anyway, these were going to be links to my build dashboard, so you could see some of what the dashboard reports look like. I'll try again in a little while. I don't want to burn up all of Steve, right? Yeah, I don't want to burn all Steve's time. Anyway, so here we are at the end. Questions? No questions. Yes, sir.
So did you have issues with the conversion from Jenkins where teams had written the monolithic build script and converting that out, or how did you guys go about doing that?
So yeah, dirty secret. I haven't completed the migration yet, and the hard ones are still to be tackled. Mostly those are Java builds with highly complicated Maven dependency chains. We're just starting to tackle that. You saw I've got a few of the easier Java builds are done. But yeah, that's my future for the rest of this quarter.
Hey Doug, before you move on, point out how many Bitbucket repos you have and how many of them you migrated out of Jenkins, so that.
So we are currently, I think we just passed 350 repos in our Bitbucket account. Some of them had migrated from GitLab, a bunch of them migrated from GitHub. The pricing model for Bitbucket, if you don't know, is per person, not per private repo. So for us, it was a big win, budget-wise. Plus, Bitbucket is just really easy to use. Sir?
When you created the Bamboo plan, did you try importing the Jenkins plan, or did you not want to try that at all?
So, well, because I was changing the paradigm, I didn't want to inject the Jenkins stuff was pretty much garbage.
Okay.
Once we decided to
bastard at the time who said, just fix it, don't migrate it.
yeah.
Yes, aside from obviously the integration, it's going to be a lot tighter with Bamboo being an isolation product, but what were the sort of, if you compare the products maturity-wise, what's attractive about Bamboo that you can't do with Jenkins? Obviously, it's Jenkins free and Bamboo not, right? So
Right. Well, so Jenkins wasn't really free because we were paying several $100s a month for the machine to run it on,
Right.
and our other teams, we've grown a lot through acquisitions, so we have multiple systems running. We're paying a bunch of money a month to CloudBees for their hosted Jenkins, and so $1,000. So yeah, Jenkins isn't free.
well, the software, yeah.
Right, and so part of the driver to go to Bamboo was that we're paying $100 a month for 5 build agents. I think it's 100 or is it 50? Anyway, small numbers, and they manage and just like any hosted offering, Well, not just like any, because they do a good job of hosting it and maintaining it. And I'm not just saying that because there's an Elastic guy here. The value of me not having to worry about it is immense. And the value for the rest of the teams and how it integrates with the HipChat feedback and the cross-linking with Jira, which we do everything in Jira. You can do a bunch of that stuff with Jenkins, with various plugins, but then you got to worry about who's maintaining the plugin, and it wasn't worth it.
Did you guys evaluate any other CI or build type servers like TeamCity or Go or anything else before you guys decided to go to Bamboo?
A bit. We were already sort of on that. There was a lot of lasting momentum, and so it had a clear lead in the beginning. But we looked into other stuff. I know Boyd's been working a lot with Travis lately, which is, I would seriously consider Travis if I didn't have anything else to start with. Does that answer your question? Sure. Okay. All right, I'm at half an hour now. Happy to keep talking, or we can pass it on to Steve.
Any other questions for Doug?
In your Node environment, how do you keep control of the different versions of Node in development? And how does that pass over to staging?
Right. So one thing I didn't show was the configuration of the Bamboo build agents. And so we have, through negotiation with the dev team, we have a particular set of versions of Node, all the accompanying tools, that every time a build agent is spun up, it installs that particular version set. And so the dev team is obligated to use a compatible set of versions. And if they want to make a change, we just talk about it real quick and I can update the build agent if they need to move forward to a new version or something. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I don't understand enough about version management, different nodes.
Here's the secret, neither do I. But I trust Brandon. And if he ever leaves me, you need to hire this guy. Brandon Balasek.
Cheers. So there's something Doug won't tell you because it was all Doug's idea. And we were failing miserably before this. Developers were pushing crap and they were jacking up the repos, so when they tried to push crap, Git would barf on the machine because it was trying to get pulled from the repo. I mean, if you can think of a problem, it was happening multiple times a week. We were losing all kinds of time and we were pissing off our customers. And you saw MasterCard. Yeah, they like to pay a lot of dollars to people who service them well, and man, are they demanding. Okay? So yeah, we weren't really exactly, we were about to lose that account. I'll be flat out. So Doug comes to me and he says, I have this idea, which you just saw. We went from, you guys suck! I mean, literally, I have people at me yelling at me at my desk while these guys are trying to do their job. All right? Happened more than once. To the CTO is sitting in a room full of other executives, and they all look at him and say, hey, you have this delivery thing for customers figured out now. Would you tell us how you're doing it? So what you saw there, just a simple idea of that version management artifact stuff, that Genesis, that Doug went, oh, look what Bamboo can do. Literally saved us millions of dollars in revenue, millions, plural, of dollars in revenue, because we were able to get control of who was deploying what. All right, so if you're thinking about how does this impact it in a DevOps way, that's it.
So I was going to say, I find it kind of amazing that companies just don't subscribe more to the automation. I just kick it backwards sometimes, that they're not willing to pay that initial cost to get things done right, so that they don't have the churn of managing the crack out. It baffles me.
So W2O is a PR firm, and that's how it's self-active. We're a PR firm. We're not a technology. Right? So why would we automate things? We're not a technology. So that's the ethos that you're running up against. Now that said, they went and hired a CTO who hired us and said, go, and then stepped back and held everybody back as best he could. So he got results.
I know. It's incredible.
Follow-on question.
Yeah.
How do you see Brent evolving in your Node environment? I see a lot of people creating the whole development process, build process in Grunt itself. Do you see anybody trying to push for that?
Yeah, although I've been too busy to pay attention lately, so I'm not exactly sure what they've been up to.
Oh, so you have an Ebola.js.
Mike, I have 2 people in the dev side that are offering the grunt stuff, and it's rare for me to say this, but I trust them to run unsupervised with, I periodically audit what they're up to, but they're really good at what they do. So I don't know exactly what they're doing lately. I should probably check back in with them if I ever have a spare moment.
So it seems exceptionally powerful for managing trans files. If you're going from copy to all of these different domain-specific languages to a target language, and that's inherently a div function as opposed to a build function, but sometimes they get splattered everywhere.
We'll see. Most of the work they're doing with is JavaScript.
One more question then.
Yeah.
You hire?
Yeah. I'm actually hiring 2 positions. You might wonder if I need a QA person. I do. But I also need someone who's good at configuration management to take over because Boyd left me. I'm sad.
Oh, you got a huge raise.
I got it. I'm okay.
If you want to know what it's like to work at W2, obviously Doug works there and he's hired. I work there, and I will not sugarcoat it, I promise. And Jeff followed me in as a contractor to help them transition when I left, and he can tell you what it's like to work there as well. So if you are considering it, you can get better than Glassdoor. So thank you, Doug.
Thank you all.